Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe's Classic Video Games back with another cool pinball, pitch and bat video for you this evening. Almost said pinball. This is not actually a pinball machine because there's no flippers. There's just a bat. It's a pitch and bat machine, but it's made by Williams, the legendary pinball people. We're going to do a video today that's a little different than what we usually do. I wanted to show off one feature of this machine. And the whole purpose of this is I'm trying to illustrate to you how brilliant the engineers were that created some of these amusement games back in the day with the way that they used electromechanical design. So they use, this is an electromechanical machine. It's from before computers, you know. So it's using switches, relays, which are coils, and motors, and a neat little thing called a stepper unit to run. And one of the most interesting things I've seen, if you're into that kind of stuff, is the way that Williams designed this feature right here, the score to beat feature. So you can see right now it's on 35 points. So I just started the game and it's on 35 points. So if I get 35 runs, which is kind of a lot, I will win I think it's 2 free games. So inside the back of this machine, these are the 2 score to beat reels. You can notice they're red. This is a feature called the Grand Slam, and this is your score, like how many runs you get. Okay, and there are a couple little adjustments I want to show to you. This is the run unit. It basically counts how many runs you've hit. Not to be confused with the score reels that display how many runs you've hit. There is a difference. This run unit has some little plugs up here which are involved with giving you a free game or whatever it is, a replay, at a certain number of runs. So in this instance, they've got it in 22, 24, and 26. You'll win a free game. But down here on the side, you have this little setup here. It says 30, 35, 40, and 45 on the run unit. So that'll be important here in a second when I show you the schematics. And then over here you have these Jones plugs. And the reason these are here are because they're adjustments. So you can pull like this plug out of here and put it there, and it changes the adjustment, right? And so there's different things that each one of these control. And there's a little diagram here that shows you what they control. So this one right here is for the number match adjustment. So what that means is at the end of the game, it will light up a light at the top, either 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. And if that number that it lights up matches your ones digit on the runs, you win a free game. Okay? It's very common in pinball machines. And then it has it says all relays. It means all replays, on or off. In some locations, you can't win a free game because if you did, it's gambling, and that was illegal in South Carolina or whatever. So you can turn that feature on and off. And the reason for that is because there's lots of different ways you can win free games on this. The 10 Grand Slam adjustment can give you either 3 replays or 5 replays. That's this one. So if you get 10 Grand Slams cumulatively, you win 3 replays. We looked at that before, and it's a carryover feature. So at the end of the game, if somebody's got 9 Grand Slams, or this wheel says 9, if in your next game you're able to hit a Grand Slam, you would win 3 replays, right? Because you're the one that took it from 9 to 10. If the score to beat is topped, which is the one we're talking about, you get 2 replays, or you can turn it off. That would kind of suck if it was turned off. The Grand Slam adjustment, replay at 3 and 6. So they can set it up where whenever you get to 3 Grand Slams on the wheel, you win a free game. Right? And so it's just a bunch of different stuff that they can adjust. And this is the interesting one here. Random reset adjustment. It can be on or off. Right now it's on because the little plug is here. If you move it to the other side, it'll be off. So that's what we want to talk about in this video, and just the way they designed this thing and how clever this little bit of engineering is. So at the beginning of the game, when you hit start, these wheels all move around because it's on the random reset adjustment, and it gives you a random number. So it had 35. I played it a little bit. The next time I hit start, it went to 28. Right? So think about that. Earlier, if I walked up, I would have had to get 35 runs to get those two replays. But now I only have to get 28. So how in the world is that working, and what is the idea behind that? So I'm going to show you in the schematics how they designed it and just what they were thinking when they did that. You've got to think too, like I was mentioning earlier, the whole point of it is when you play this, you're only playing against yourself. So they're trying to think up ways to make it something that you would want to play, or to get you entertained enough that you put another quarter in or whatever. So since you can't play against another team, they're basically creating a team for you. And so the team's going to win 28, hit 28 runs this game. The previous game, they hit 35 runs. Kind of random. So let's look at the schematics and see if we can track down exactly what they're doing and how they're making that work with no computers. So if you look through the schematics, you will find these two coils. Now there is one coil on each one of these score reels. The 0 to 9 score to beat drum and the 10 to 90 score to beat drum. Okay. So if you have the machine set up where it doesn't do the random reset, so you have that turned off, then those score reels work completely differently. So I'll show you how that works. Basically, we'll go with the 0 to 9 one. See this little switch right here? It says high score relay. And you can see that it's normally connected this way, but if this relay were to pull in, this switch would connect power here, which gives it the coil on the drum will have power from one side of the neutral side of the transformer, and then the coil itself is already connected to the hot side. So when the high score relay pulls in, it will turn that drum, right? And you can see the transformer here. You can see what I'm talking about. The power is connected to both sides of the transformer. So basically that would make that coil energize. When the coil energizes, it would step forward one position, right? Or I guess it would when it let go. So the high score relay, what makes it pull in? So it's this area here of the schematics, and this is pretty complex, but basically power is connected here, and it's connected through the 10 to 90 score to beat stepper unit, right? And basically it's at a certain position. It will, so let's say that it's at position 21 or whatever, and you just beat 21. You got past that. So let's say that the score to beat says 21, and you get to 22. Well, it will connect through the 10 to 90 score to beat thing and the drum and blah, 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 and it will connect power. When the run unit pulls in for that 20-second run, it will close a switch on the end of the run unit. The reason they do that is so that it's just temporary, so that it just closes once, right? And when it does that, it will send power to the high score relay latch. And if your random reset adjustment is not off, it's on. Oh, well, I'm sorry. If your random reset adjustment is turned off, not on, this high score relay will be pulled in. So since we have it on random reset, this is not plugged in. So this coil doesn't work at all, right? But if we didn't have the random reset on, this coil would pull in. Now I know this is a little confusing, but it'll all come together here in a minute. I'll show you. So if you're not doing the random reset thing, when you beat the score to the score that you're supposed to win, it pulls in the high score relay latch, and it pulls in the high score relay. So since the high score relay pulled in, it turns on the 0 to 9 score to beat drum. So in other words, it steps it up one position. And then since the high score relay is turned on by the end of stroke switch on the run unit, as soon as the run unit adds that run, that switch will open again. So this will just go click, and it'll go click and add one position on that. So in other words, long story short, if you're not on the random reset adjustment, if that's not turned on, when you beat the score to beat, it moves it up to whatever you just scored. So if it's at 23 and I score 24, bam, it will move the score to beat up to 24. If I score 3 more runs, bam, it'll run the score to beat up to 27 or whatever, right? So it will keep increasing it based on whatever score I score that beats it. So that's the 0 to 9 unit. So here you have the 10 to 90 unit, right? So we're at 27 runs, 28 runs, 29 runs. And then you have this. So on the 10 to 90 unit, there is a switch that closes at the 9th position of the first one. So when this one gets to 9, so it says 29, right, in our example, this switch will close. That is connected to the 10 to 90 unit. Now, the next time that high score relay pulls in, not only is it going to move this one up 1 from 29 to 0, so now it'll say 20, but because that one had a switch closed on the 9th position, that same relay is also going to move this one up 1 position to 30. And you can see that because they put the switch on the 9th position of this reel, it can't move this one up until this one goes from 9 to 0. So that's how they use it to count. Now this is very common. They use it on all of the score reels and all of the pinball machines and stuff. So this isn't the most interesting part of this. I'm just showing you how this thing in particular is designed to work. So my whole point, when you score, whenever it's not turned on the random reset, as you beat the score to beat, it increases the score to beat. And if you just leave it like that, like let's say the score to beat is 23 or whatever, and you never beat 23, it will just stay 23. So that's one way that it moves the scores. So this is the run unit we're talking about. So when you score, this pulls in, this coil. So you just scored a run, and this is the end of stroke switches that it's going to hit here, right? So as this goes in, it just closed the switch that would turn on the coil to move that up 1 more position, right? And each time you hit a run, it's going to do that because of how that's wired. So that's one. So down here inside the game, there is a button right here. It's kind of hard to tell, but that is a button on a switch. If I hit that, I'm pushing 2 switches together. You can see the switch blades are over here. They're under this bracket. So as I press that, I am connecting 2 switch blades. Okay. That little button is called the high score reset button. So the operator, without taking the back off of the game or whatever, can just press that button. So when I press that button, I'm closing that switch. And so that will connect power from neutral through, and then through this switch. And this switch says, open at 5. So this is where we start getting a little loopy. This is where the things change a lot from the way that regular pinball machines are designed. There is a switch that opens at 5 on the 0 to 9 score to beat drum. It's again connected through the high score relay that in our instance isn't turned on right now, so it would just be closed. And that pulses the 0 to 9 score to beat drum. So what does that mean? It means if I press that button, each time I press it, it's going to move this forward 1 position until it gets to 5 of all things. And then it's going to make it stop at 5, not 0. So it's the high score reset button, but you're resetting it to 5. Because they don't want you setting it where you win a free game at 0 runs or anything. They want it to be at least 5, right? But that's not all. So you got another switch on that same button. And again, it's on a button. It's not on a relay. It's just on a button. When you press this one, it connects through here, through a switch on the 10 to 90 unit that opens at 1. You never see these. This might be the only example of this in pinball type games. I don't know. There were probably other EM games that had a similar feature, but this is the first I've really seen it and looked into it. So this is the 10s unit. That switch opens at 1. So if I press that button, it's going to keep pulsing this coil until I get to 1. And then if I keep pressing the button, it's not going to do anything. And this one is going to open at 5. So my whole point, if you press the button inside the door a few times, eventually the score is going to get back to 15 as the score to beat, and it's going to stay there. So that's one way that you reset the score to beat. So the operator might come in and maybe somebody's driven that thing up to 38 runs, right? And he's like, oh man, nobody's ever going to beat that. It's not something that anybody's going to try to get, and I'm probably losing money because they're not even playing it because they think that the score to beat's too high. And so he hits that button and it resets it back to 15. Now theoretically, if you hit the button a couple times, you could probably get it to where it said like 68 or something. That wouldn't actually work because of what I'm going to show you next, but you could get it where it was actually higher, right? But basically as you press the button, it's going to get it back to 15. That's the purpose of the button, right? All right, so that's one way to change it. So one way is it changes on its own whenever you beat it. So if you get it to 25 and then you get 26 runs, it'll change on its own up to 26 and it'll work its way up. One way to move it is if you hit the high score reset button, it will reset it with you standing there looking at it, right? Now, the other thing is, how do we get will this just keep building up as you beat it? So let's say that you get to 35 runs or whatever. Will it just keep going and going and going and going until the guy resets the thing by hitting the button? Well, no, they have a provision for that too, and that was the little jumper that I showed you on the run unit. So here's the run unit we were looking at, and we were looking at the reset adjustment on the side, and it said 30, 35, or it said 30, 30, what did it say? 20, 25, 30, 30, I think it said, am I going to have to go look? 25, 30, 35, 40, I believe is what it said, right? So those are positions on the run unit. And again, each time you score a run, this is going to move up one position. Well, let's say you have it set on 35. When you get to 35, power is going to connect through the little finger on the run unit, through that rivet, and through the plug that you have plugged into the position 35 on the side of the unit that we were just looking at. So that is going to send neutral through the unit only when it's at 35, because it's on that one rivet, through the wire. And again, you have the random reset adjustment turned off, and I'll show you why that's important here in a minute. And it connects power when the high score relay pulls in, right? Same as the other thing. And turns on the high score reset relay latch, not the high score relay latch that we saw earlier. I know this is all confusing because it's all the same names, but the high score reset relay latch, it turns that on. So that's these two switches, this one and this one close. But only if you've gotten to the number on the run unit. So like 30 or 35 or whatever, in our instance 35. So what that does is, when the game is over, the game over relay closes and the score motor is turning. So this switch on the impulse reel will start hitting, right, as the score motor is turning. So when this switch closes, and it's impulse, so it'll close multiple times, as it closes, since this switch is closed and since this switch is closed, it will reset the 0 to 9 unit back to 5, because this switch will open at 5. And then at the same time, the same setup, since this switch is closed, will pulse the 10 to 9 unit, 10 to 90 unit, until it opens at 1. So my whole point is, when you finally get up to whatever that run unit is set at, to reset at, like 35 or whatever, it will automatically reset itself back to 15. Just because you've got that little jumper in there. And you can set that for 25, 30, 35, or 40. So it's a very, very brilliant design, the way they were able to do that, with just switches all kind of tied into each other. But the most interesting part that they've done is the random reset adjustment. So I've showed you all the things now that are if the random reset is turned off. So now I want to show you what the thing is designed to do if the random reset is turned on. And if you're wondering about that other relay that turned itself on whenever you beat the score to beat, it turned on the high score relay latch, not to be confused with the high score relay, and not to be confused with the high score reset relay latch. The high score relay latch, when it turns that on, it's involved with stepping up the replay unit, so that that's how you actually win your free game, right? Or 2 free games in our instance. So that's what that one's for. All right, so now we are going to turn on the random reset adjustment. When the game starts, this start relay pulls in. Click, and it will send power down this line through various things. And one of the things that it will do is, when this switch closes at position 3C, position 3C on the score motor, the A stands for the score motor. When it closes at position 3C, it will turn on what's called the number 2 mix relay. Now this is all going to get very complex, but I'll try to go through it as best I can. So basically, we have the random reset adjustment on. It will turn on the number 2 mix relay when it gets to position 3C. Now that number 2 mix relay will hold itself on because of a switch on itself, no matter what this switch does. It will then hold itself on until this switch opens, when it gets back to the index position of cam C. So that's home, the home position. So here is the score motor drawn, and it turns in this direction. This is the home position. Well, this score motor gets started at the beginning of the game, right? And so when it starts turning, it's turning in this direction. This little divot here will start heading this way. And what it's going to do is, when it gets to like here, it's going to make all these switches change. And when it gets to here, it's going to make all these switches change. And when it gets around to position 3, which it's kind of hard to judge how far these are, but whenever it gets around to here, it's going to open these switches, right? And so what that's going to do, I say open, but it's going to move that, right? What that's going to do is it's going to turn on the number 2 mix relay at this position. So this is all timing stuff now. So from here until this turns all the way back around to here, the number 2 mix relay will be turned on. So it will be on this arc, but on this first arc, it's turned off. So here's the number 2 mix relay, a switch on it that's closed. So when the score motor starts, this switch will still be closed, because remember, the number 2 mix relay doesn't turn on until it gets to the 3rd position. So for the first half of the score motor's revolution, from home to home position, this will still be closed. So that's closed, and the score reset relay is going to be clicking in the entire time this is going, because the start relay turns that on. So this is used to reset the run score that you've got in the back box that you've earned, right? The 2 white wheels over on the right. So these are going to be pulling in. So there's an extra switch on it just for this. Now, since we've got the random reset adjustment on, this is all going to work. If we had it turned off, it would just end right there, and although this would still do its thing, it wouldn't be connected to anything. But since we've turned it on, it's now connected. So as the score resets pull in, for the first half of that revolution of the score motor, since this switch is still closed, it's going to pulse power through this line And here's our old switch that opens at position 1 on the 10 to 90 score to beat drum. So at the beginning of the game, it's going to pulse that 10 to 90 score to beat drum until it gets back to 1. So this is the impulse cam on this game. You'll notice that it has 20 impulses on it. So one full revolution of this thing will impulse the switch 20 times, which is very different than how they do most pinball machines. Most pinball machines from home to home position, there's 5 impulses, but on this one there's 20. So again, we're starting here, and from this position to about this position, which is about where our switch 3 was, it will impulse 10 times. So for instance, if the score motor, if the score to beat is 21, that 2 will get pulsed 10 times and it will get back to position 1 and it will open up at 1. If it's at 45, which it can't really get to, but let's say it's at 45 runs, it will pulse 10 times, and whenever it gets to 1, it'll open up. So it's designed with a little bit of slop in it, I guess, just in case one pulse doesn't hit or something. But there's plenty of action on these 10 impulses to get it back to the position of 1, no matter what your score is, right? So for the first half of the revolution, it resets the tens unit on the score to beat back to 1. Well, when it gets to position 3, the number 2 mix relay turns on. So when it turns on, it's going to open that switch, which means no matter what the score reset relay is doing, none of that really matters anymore. And by that time, it will be reset back to 1, so it doesn't matter. So that switch is going to open when it gets to position 3 because the mix relay, number 2 mix relay, turns on. So it's kind of backwards, because it's a normally closed switch. So when that switch opens, another one closes. So another switch on the mix relay, the number 2 mix relay, will close at position 3 when the number 2 mix relay pulls in. This will connect power to this line, which is going to close at position 1 plus on the B cam. Kind of a weird one. So here is the B cam on the score motor, and this is position 1 plus. So again, we've turned this far, and our mix relay pulls on right here. This is really kind of hard to understand, but so right here our mix relay pulls in. This wheel will keep turning until this spot gets back to here, So as it turns, now since that mix relay's in, that switch is connected. Well, this switch here, which is normally open, as this turns, when that gets there, that will fall in and bam, give you 1 pulse, right? And then it's going to ride back up on this little plate, and then as it keeps turning, this will hit it, or this here will hit it, right? So it's going to go down, up, down, right? And then back up as it turns. So it's kind of hard to understand this. I don't know how good your spatial skills are, but basically this is going to still turn half a revolution. So this is going to turn half a revolution. So this is going to go down in that little groove and then back up and then down in the groove and back up because this has to turn around 1 full turn. So it will pulse twice as it's turning. That's why they call it the +1 position, because it's adding an extra pulse instead of just the 1 regular one, right? All that to say, that switch is going to close twice. So this switch is closed at position 3. This is going to close at position 1 plus B, right? And so it's connected to a couple places on the mix unit, and the mix unit has a jumper across it. This can be in various positions. Well, if it happened to be on either one of those positions, that would send 2 pulses through it to the 10 to 90 score to beat drum. So that would change your score to beat from 10, where it reset, to 30. What in the world? It doesn't like my mouse. That would turn your 10 to 90 score from 10 points to beat, or it would be at 15 because the other one reset to 5, right? So it'd be either 15, 25, or 35. So if it's on that position of the mix unit, it would pulse it twice and make it 35. Well, let's say it's on this position of the mix unit. Well, that wouldn't be connected. As a matter of fact, nothing's connected. So that would not get pulsed. So it would leave your score at 15 to beat. Well, let's say the mix unit is on this position, the second position there. Well, that's connected differently. That's connected through this switch that also gets pulsed, right? Which is position 4C. So whenever it gets to position 4, now remember it turned on at position 3 to turn that on. As it turns around, it gets to position 4. It will close that switch and send power through there and pulse that up one time because position 4C only hits once. All right, so what does all that mean? That means that whatever position this mix unit is on determines how your score to beat is at the beginning of the game. So when I hit start, it spins those reels around. It goes back to 1. The score motor keeps turning. This does its thing. And when it gets to either position 4 or position 1 plus or no position at all, it will pulse this either 1 time, 2 times, or no times. So it's all determined by where this mix unit is. So let's see how the mix unit moves. Okay, so the score to beat then, if it's randomly reset, is completely dependent on where the mix unit is. What position is the mix unit at? If you're at position 1 on the mix unit, then your score to beat's going to start with a 1. If you're at position 4 on the mix unit, your score to beat's going to start with a 2. If you're at position 7 on the mix unit, your score to beat's going to start with a 3. It's not random, but it appears to be random. It's pseudo-random, right? To the player, it looks random. Like, how in the world is it just randomly, and it even says random reset. How is it just randomly coming up with a different number every time you start? It's because of wherever the position of this mix unit is. And this is similar to some of the stuff that Bally did in their bingo games and other companies. The bingo machines have to have a pseudo-random kind of number generator, which is basically what this is, for the statistic, for the gambling part of it, you know. So what makes the mix unit go up? So the step-up unit, the mix unit just goes in one position over and over and over again. It just keeps going. And when it gets to position 10, it resets back to position 1, right? So what steps that up? Well, it's a line on switch 1, on position 1, but it says C. Now the A on like this cam means the score motor, which is the main motor that runs the whole machine. The C is the pitching motor. So the way they change the mix unit is depending on how many times you've pitched the ball. So this is the pitch unit underneath the playfield. As the motor turns, it closes a switch. I don't know if it's that particular one. There's a few of them around there, but it closes a switch, and each time that switch closes, it steps up the match unit. I mean, not the match unit, the mix unit. Right? So the whole point of the getting the random number and everything, it's dependent on how many times you pitch, and of course, you pitch by pressing the pitch button. So it's actually controlled by the player. But you don't know that, of course, as the player, and you have no way of keeping track of it, really. Right? And you don't know how the score to beat is wired in the back, so you don't know, there's no way to game it, really. I mean, if you were just brilliant and you owned one, you could probably figure it out. But so because of the nature of the game, you know, you hit the ball and you might get an out, and then you might hit the ball 10 times and not get an out, and you might hit the ball, get another out, and then 3 times later you get an out, but you win an extra inning, And so you blah blah blah. So it's the number of times that you're going to press the pitch button is completely different each game that's played. It's never going to be the same, which means that mix unit is always going to be in a different position on each game, which means that the score to beat being starting with a 1, a 2, or a 3 is going to be different on each game. But as you've seen, since it resets it back to a 1 every time, it can't ever be a 0. So it's never going to be less than 10. But it's never going to be 4 because it's never going to step up more than twice. All right, so you got all that. So when the start relay comes on, it sends power through here, and whenever we get to position C again, position 1 on cam C, whenever we get to position 1, not to be confused with the home position, when we get to position 1, this switch will close. And since we have the random reset adjustment on, now again, if it was off, this would still happen, but it wouldn't do anything because it wouldn't be connected. But since we have the random reset adjustment on, it will connect power through here, and it will turn on the number 1 mix relay. Now, I know you were wondering where it was because I said there was a number 2 mix relay. So it will come on at position 1, and it will hold itself on. Now, this one works kind of backwards from the other one, which is, again, this is freaking brilliant. These people knew this, they knew how to design this crap backwards and forwards. They completely understood it. And some of this is so creative that it's kind of fun, you know, that they were... I can see these guys coming up with something and then explaining it to their engineer buddies and laughing about how cool it was that they came up with this. I understand it just a little bit. I hope I'm able to explain it enough that some of y'all will understand it too and get the coolness of it, right? So the number 1 mix relay comes on whenever the score motor gets to position 1, and then it holds itself on with a switch on itself. And then it will hold itself on depending on, again, where the damn mix unit is, right? So if you're in, let's say, this first position, it will hold itself on until this switch opens at position 3. Well, what does that mean? Well, if we look at our score motor again, let me show you position 1. Here is position 1, so it will start turning, and bam, that's when it will turn itself on, right? So it will turn itself on at position 1. Well, position 1 is kind of like right there. It's something like right there. Position 3 is like right here. So from there to there, it will be turned on if the mix unit is at position 1. I mean, if the mix unit is at position 1. So what does that mean? Well, let me find it on here. Where are we? There we are. That means that switch will close when the number 1 mix relay comes on. So when the score motor gets to position 1, that switch will close. This switch is the impulse ones we were just looking at. So you're going to be at some place like 3 impulses in or something of the 20 that it's capable of doing. So if the mixing unit is at position 1, that switch will close. This will be pulsing, bam, 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 right, as it turns around. And it will step up the 0 to 9 score like 7 times. So let's say at the end of the previous game it was on 3. It was on 33 is the score to beat. Well, the 10 to 90 drum will reset back to 1 because of the number 2 mix thing, and then we'll step up 0, 1, or 2 points, positions. While that's going on, since this switch closed, this will start pulsing
and that will move 7 points. But here's the thing. Remember how at the beginning of the game it was resetting to 5 whenever we had it set up the other way? Well, it has no way to do that because you're not hitting the high score reset button, right? And the high score reset relay latch is not locked in. So this switch doesn't do anything now. That's not how it's doing it. All of that isn't going to do a freaking thing. All right? It's doing it through this line, which runs through the number 1 mix relay as this hits. Now remember, the number 1 mix relay we just showed can't possibly come on. It's completely disconnected if the random reset adjustment is not turned on. So if the random reset adjustment's turned on, at the beginning of the game, as this turns around, it's going to pulse that 7 times and change your 3 to a 0. All right, so what if this one was at a 30, and then you just made this one go over 0? Well, then that would change this to a 40, right? Because of this switch. So when this one gets to 9, it's going to pulse this one more time. Except it's not, because the way it did it was through the high score relay. It doesn't do it through the number 1 relay or the number 2 relay. So if this spins 7 points from 3 to 0, it's going to stop at 0 and it's not going to pulse this up. So what that means is this could possibly end up on 0 while this ends up on 1. So the lowest number you could get at the beginning of the game would be 10. So that score to beat very well could reset to 10 because of the way the thing's designed. All right, so how do they randomize it? Well, let's go back to the number 1 mix relay. So it holds itself on, and in our example, it would turn on at position 1 and it would turn off at position 3 because that switch would open up. But let's say that this is at position 4. Well, then it would turn itself on at position 1, and since the mix unit, which is controlled by how many times you've pressed the pitching button, which is just crazy, it would then hold itself on until position 4, right? And when position, now you may recognize that switch. They were already using it for the number 2 mix relay. It would hold itself on until position 4, and so whenever that clicked in, it would get its power through the mix relay, which would have turned itself on position 3, right? So this would drop out at position 4. Well, what's that mean? That means now it's holding itself on longer, up to position 4. So instead of pulsing it 7 times, position 4 is way up here kind of at the top. We'll say 12 o'clock. It's going to turn on like right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and pulse about 12 times. So if you were on 3, instead of it saying pulsing 7 times and stopping on 10 points, we're hoping, it's going to go past that another 5 hits. So now it's going to land on 5. So it pulsed it 12 times. So it appears that they have it set up where it will pulse the ones either 7 times or 12 times. But it looked like there was one more over there. So let's go back one more time. Look and hold itself on. Nope, it's just 2. So it's either going to be to position 3 or until position 4. But you see how that's backwards, right? Like it's just designed backwards than how they're doing the number 2 mix relay. Absolutely brilliant, in my opinion. Well, since we know that's how it works, we ought to be able to game it. So, well, not game it, but just play around with it. So we're at 28 now. I'm going to reset it and just watch what it does. So we know that the first reel is going to reset back to 1 and then may step up from there. And then the right wheel is just going to move a few times. All right, I didn't check how many times the right one moved. All right, so if I this is the mix unit. If I advance that a couple spots, 3 positions, and then reset it again, let's see if we get something different. So that time we got our lucky thing where it didn't step up the 1. Okay, so that time I didn't pay attention to how many. There's too much to watch. So that time it didn't reset the 10s to 10 because the switch was already open. It was already at 1 and it stepped it up 1 position. Now since I haven't moved the mixing unit, if I hit it again we should get a similar thing. The 2 should just reset back to 1 and then step up 1 position back to 2. And then the 6, I didn't see how many positions it moved. Wasn't it at 9? So maybe it moved 7 positions. So it should go, if we do it this time, it should go to 23, guessing. I don't know for sure that the 6 moved 7 times, though. But let's see. Because we're leaving the mix unit in the exact same spot. All right, so if I hit it again, it should land on 20. Because the 2 should reset to 1 and then step back up to 1. Up to 2 because the mix unit has not moved. And then the 3 should add 7 runs, 7 numbers, and it should land at 0. And it won't roll over the 2 to a 3 because it doesn't have a 9 position switch that is pulsed by any of this stuff. So theoretically, it should land at 20. And one more time just to prove the concept. If I hit it this time, the left one should again work back to 2. It's always going to be the same if the mix unit hasn't moved. And then the 0 should move to 7. Wow, so cool. All right, so if I move this up, then again, that's pulsed by each time you pitch. So if I move this up, we'll just do 1 position. 1 position. It should change the whole setup. So it should be all different now. So if it was exactly the same, it should again go back to 20 and then give me 7 on the other one. So we would be at 24. But it's not going to do that because I moved the mix unit. We'll get something different this time. All right. So in this instance, it gave us... it did do the 7. So it's still giving us 7 on the right, but on the left, we're at the magic position where it just stays at 1. It doesn't step up any at all on the left. So if I do it again, we should get to 11. Wow, that's a pretty good one. All right, so let's step it up 1 more position. Because we pitched 1 more ball. Now remember, this resets every 10 positions. So if you pitched 11 times, it would be the same as if you pitched 1 time. All right, so let's see what this position gets us. So the left is going to reset, or it's going to stay at 1 because it doesn't have to reset to 1. And then once the score motor gets around to position 4, the mix number 2 relay will pull in and either step that up 0, 1, or 2 positions. And then the right side will step up either 7 or 12 positions. I think we counted. So 7. And the left is still staying at the position where it doesn't step up. Let's see if we can get one that's just crazy where it does all kinds of stuff. Okay, so that's 1 and 7. I'd like to get one where it does the 12 that I think it can do. Is it always 7? Did I misread it? And it's always going to be 7? Let's see, I moved it up 1 position. Oh, that time it was only 1. All right, so are we at a situation where it's only 1 sometimes?
Yeah. Yeah, so on this one, it's always going to step up one position on the right, and it's going to step up 2 positions on the left. How is it doing 1? Let me see if I can figure out how it's only doing 1 position. I figured it was 12. Okay, so the reason it only does 1 is because I forgot about this switch. So that one's going to be open. So one more time. This is going to close at position 1, which is going to turn on the number 1 mixed relay. It's going to hold itself on if it's on this spot until position 3 when it opens back up, which is going to give it 7 pulses. If it's on this other spot, it's going to try to hold itself on through this, but it can't because that won't close till position 3. Well, this switch is going to open back up as soon as it's off of position 1. So when it gets to position 3 and this closes, this will have long relaxed and can't hold itself on, so that switch will be open. And then no matter what you do, you can't get that switch closed again unless this closes. So I don't even know why they have that wire there. So I don't know why that would even be there. There's a couple options. One, it could be because it's just a standardized thing that was on another game and it does something different on another game. But if that was the case, they probably wouldn't even draw it in these schematics if it's not doing anything in this particular instance. The other thing is real tricky, but I've been looking at this for 30 minutes trying to figure it out. When it's resetting the 10 to 90 thing at the beginning like it does, that switch is closed until you get to position 1, right? So as we're up off the screen. So for the first half, while this is closed, as this is closing, each time it closes, it's sending power to here. Well, since that's connected, it would also have power here. And if your little jumper is in this position, well, on this one it would be in this position, which would mean power would come down through here. When you got to position 1 plus that we looked at a minute ago, which looks like it's at about position 1 and then about at position 3 or something like that. Whenever you got to that would close, which the power would then travel through here, through that closed switch, down to here, through the jumper. If that switch was closed, it would pull it in. So since that lines up with switch 1, basically you're shorting power through here to turn it on, and then right when it turns on, power is also present there, back-fed through all of this as it's resetting the score drums. So maybe they did, I don't know why they did that, but it does seem like it hits at the exact same time. So I don't know why they would want to have 2 at the same time. If it was slightly offset, you could see that they were doing it to add 2 points instead of 1 point, but I don't know. I can't see it because no matter, you can't get around. That's going to open up as soon as this switch closes again, which is as soon as it gets past position 1. That's going to open up no matter what, and it can't hold itself on through here because that's not closed until position 3. So no matter what, that doesn't seem to be able to do anything. So maybe one of you can figure it out and tell me in the comments down below. Okay, well that's it. I looked in the schematics. It looked to me like it should pulse it more than once, but again, it's working how it's working. So I mean, if the one's pulsing 7 and then the other one's only pulsing 1, I must be misreading something, and it doesn't matter anyway. It's still giving you the random reset. So very cool. I like it. I think it's just an awesome way of doing it. Awesome little bit of engineering. Now, if you were a software engineer now, it'd be really simple to code that, And, you probably wouldn't even have to code it. You just use a little script or something that somebody else figured out a long time ago. But think about doing that back in the day with just relays and switches and a little stepper unit that moves around. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. And then the idea to say, hey, I know where we can get something to move the stepper. Well, every time it pitches a ball, we'll make it move up 1 and then they'll never be able to figure it out. Right? It's not as if somebody could figure out the timing of it and know by looking at the number, hey, next time I only need 11 to beat the score. Nobody's going to go through all that trouble. But they did have to do something to try to make it where you couldn't obviously tell what was happening. And so that's how they came up with their random little number generator. Now, we did it over and over again on the exact same position to make it a little more obvious to see the pattern. But if the pattern was you got 27, and then the next time around you got 11, and then the next time around you got 17, and the next time around you got 1, it would be much harder to figure out. So very cool. So I hope you enjoyed that. I wanted to do a whole video just on this one thing and just go super, super deep into detail on it. And, I still don't completely understand all of it, like why it's doing 1 when by my estimation, at first I thought it should do 12, but then after I found that other switch, kind of looks like it should do 4 or 5. It's so deep and complex that it really takes you a long time to figure out a lot of this stuff. But back in the day, since that was how the tech was at the time, to them it was probably obvious. It was probably just as obvious as a computer guy would be able to look at code and tell what's going on now. They probably taught this stuff in school, But that was a long time ago. 61 years somebody made this. So you can be almost assured that whoever came up with that idea has probably passed away. And I think this is maybe the first game that it was on. It may have also been on the 1962 World Series game that they did the year before. And it may be some kind of holdover from bingo games. The bingo games had all kinds of little features and stuff on them. All of them ran just by relays and switches and motors and stepper units. So it could be that this is something that was on other machines. There were also horse racing games that were these big old cabinets with just lights on them and stuff. And it had all kinds of pseudo-random stuff in it like this. I'm sure it... if it's not completely random, you can design it so that you never really lose, like the house is never really going to lose. But some of those machines were, in the bingo games, were straight up gambling games. So there was money on the line. So they couldn't make it where you're going to win more than not, They had to make it where it made sense for the operator. And this was similar, but in a less serious way. But still, if they made this so easy that you just won a free game every time you played, that would half the income that the operator was able to make. So one of the things that they did to combat that was they made all of these adjustments in it. Like some operators might hate this idea. They might say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Well, they've got a jack in there where you can turn it off and make it where it works the old-fashioned way, where the number just keeps going up. And they also had the jack in there where you can make it where, hell, they don't win anything if they beat the score to beat. Maybe you don't like that feature at all, and as an operator, you don't want that in your game. Well, you can turn it off. So they had to think of ways to make it creative and fun for the player, and interesting new concepts, but where the operators still had control over it, where they wouldn't feel like they were going bankrupt. And unfortunately, we're at a time in technology and in the way money works, kind of, and I'll talk about that for a second, to where these things they're not viable really in this form anymore. It used to be this thing was probably a dime to play whenever it was new. Yeah, it says it right here. One play, 10 cents. So it was a dime to play this when it was new because people were walking around with dimes in their pocket. So think about that. You walk in a convenience store or something, they've got one of these, and you just happen to have some change in your pocket because everybody used to. I put a dime in it and play it. It was a business model, and it actually made sense. And then it moved up to a quarter. Well, that's cool. Everybody's got quarters in their pockets. It's a little more money, but that's just change. I've got it in my pocket here. Let me drop it in there. Why not? And then about 19, it was at just the right time where you could actually earn enough money, a dime or a quarter at a time, to pay this thing off, to where you owned it and made a profit.
And the operators would split the money in half with the location. So we get up into the 90s, and or I guess it was in the 80s with Dragon's Lair. Well, now it's 50 cents. Okay, I've got 2 quarters in my pocket, or I can put a dollar bill in the change machine and get 4 quarters. Okay, now it's 75 cents. Because inflation, the games cost more. A quarter is not worth what it used to be. So now it's 75 cents. That's kind of weird. Kind of an ugly number, too, you know. Do I have 3 quarters? I don't know if I got 3 quarters. Damn. And you can't play, it's not Square anymore. So you can't play 2 games for $1. You know, you're only going to be able to play 1 game, but then you've got 1 quarter left, but you can't use it. So it doesn't work out as well. Well, then now we're to the point where it really needs to be about $1.75, something like that. Well, how the hell do you do that? That's weird, you know. So now we're into microtransactions with credit cards. Well, there's fees involved with the credit card. So it's just changed everything. There was a time for these things where it made perfect sense. How easy was it? You walk up and you've got a pocket full of change. It's a dime. I put a dime in and play it. It's perfect, but it's kind of because it was the right time, right? We can't really do that now. I'm not going to walk up, hey, I got $1.75 in my pocket. Let me pop it in. It don't work like that, you know. So that's one of the reasons that these are kind of a gone thing, you know. It's part of it's just the timing of it and just the way the money works. So it's a shame, but we can still admire them and look at the brilliance of the designer. So I hope you enjoyed that. Usually we don't do a video about one little thing like that, but I thought it was so cool and just so interesting, and it showed so well how creative these engineers were that I figured that it was worth its own video. So we've got one more video to do on this Major League where we're going to do all the cosmetic stuff. We're painting it right now. We've got to replace this. We're going to paint the targets. We've got to clean the playfield. There's some plastic plexiglass pieces that we have to replace. We've got a replacement back glass for it. And we're probably going to put a little lacquer on the wood there. So we still got a little bit to do, but it's all cosmetic. The thing's playing really well, and the score to beat is randomly resetting. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like these pitching bats, let me show you a really creative one that came out a few years after this, where they used lights on the playfield instead of the running man unit, I guess, to save some money. So I'll put that video up here. And then whenever we finally get our video for the cosmetic stuff of this game done, I'll put it to replace it. So see you on the next one. Hope you enjoyed it.